People often misunderstand avoidant attachment. They think avoidants don't care, don't feel deeply, or simply aren't capable of love. That's not true. In fact, avoidants often feel everything intensely. They've just trained themselves to survive by hiding it. Their emotional world is like a fortress, not because they want to keep love out, but because they learned early that letting people in could be dangerous. And that's what makes this so important. When an avoidant starts doing certain things, it isn't casual. It isn't accidental. It isn't something they do for everyone. It's a profound shift. It means the walls are moving. It means trust is growing. And most importantly, it often means love has arrived. The first sign is consistency. Avoidants are famous for intermittent connection. Hot one day, distant the next. Present until things feel too intimate, then suddenly unavailable. But love changes that. When an avoidant truly cares, they begin regulating themselves differently. They stop treating connection like a threat. Their communication becomes more predictable. They check in without being prompted. They follow through. Consistency is not natural for someone who associates closeness with danger. It's a choice. And when they repeatedly choose you, that's significant. The second sign is voluntary vulnerability. Avoidants don't reveal weakness easily. They have spent years mastering emotional self-containment. Vulnerability feels like handing someone a weapon. So when they start sharing fears, insecurities, disappointments, or painful memories, pay attention. This is not ordinary conversation. This is trust in its purest form. They are allowing you access to the parts of themselves they've protected from almost everyone else. Love makes that possible. The third sign is inclusion. Avoidants fiercely protect their independence. Their routines, their space, their internal world, these are sacred territories. When they begin naturally including you in future plans, daily decisions, or personal rituals, something fundamental has changed. You're no longer an outsider visiting their world. You're becoming part of it. And avoidants do not make that transition lightly. The fourth sign is repair after conflict. Conflict is often an avoidance exit ramp. Distance feels safer than resolution. But when they love you, they return. They circle back. They initiate conversations after arguments. They clarify misunderstandings. They attempt repair even when it's uncomfortable. This is enormous, because repair requires emotional exposure, accountability, and tolerance for discomfortable areas that challenge avoidant wiring. Yet, love motivates growth. The fifth sign is physical and emotional proximity, not performative affection, not temporary intensity, sustained closeness. An avoidant in love starts lingering. They stay on the phone longer, they sit closer, they seek your presence even when no practical reason exists. They begin associating your presence with safety instead of pressure. That's the turning point. When you become their refuge rather than their threat, love is already deeply rooted. The sixth sign is protective transparency. Avoidants often keep internal struggles private. They don't want to burden others, and they certainly don't want to appear dependent. But love changes the equation. They start explaining their withdrawals. They tell you when they're overwhelmed. They communicate instead of disappearing. That may seem small, but for an avoidant, it's revolutionary. They're not just managing their emotions anymore. They're protecting the relationship, and that is love in action. Here's what many people miss. Avoidants rarely transform through pressure. They transform through safety. Demanding more usually triggers retreat. Creating security invites expansion. Love cannot be forced out of an avoidant. It must be trusted into existence. And when it happens, it's one of the most loyal forms of love you'll ever experience. Because avoidants do not open quickly. They do not trust easily. They do not invest carelessly. So when they begin dismantling lifelong defenses for you, understand the magnitude of what you're witnessing. This isn't casual affection. This is courage. This is healing. This is love learning how to stay. And avoidance love won't always look dramatic. It won't necessarily arrive with grand speeches or cinematic gestures. It will arrive in patterns, in reliability, in honesty, in presence. In the subtle but unmistakable decision to remain emotionally available when every instinct once told them to run. And that is one of the clearest signs of all. Because for an avoidant, love is not proven by intensity. It's proven by endurance. Avoidants rarely express love through words. First, they express it through changed behavior. That is one of the most important truths to understand if you care about someone with avoidant attachment. They may feel deeply, even intensely, but their emotions often move through action long before they ever reach language. For them, words can feel risky. Words create expectations. Words can be remembered, analyzed, and in their minds potentially used against them. Behavior, however, feels safer. It allows them to communicate while maintaining some sense of control. This is why many people completely miss the moment an avoidant falls in love. They're listening for declarations while ignoring the transformation happening right in front of them. Love for an avoidant is rarely announced. It is demonstrated quietly, consistently, sometimes so subtly that only those paying close attention will notice. An avoidant who is developing genuine feelings begins to alter their normal patterns. They reach out first. They linger a little longer. They become more predictable. The person who once took hours or even days to respond suddenly checks in just because they thought about you. The individual who fiercely guarded their independence starts making room for you in their routine. These changes may seem ordinary to others, but for an avoidant, they are extraordinary. Their behavior shifts because their internal priorities shift. You are no longer simply someone they enjoy, you are becoming someone they value, someone whose presence matters. And when an avoidant values you, they start taking emotional risks they would never have considered before. You may notice they begin sharing more personal details. Stories from childhood, fears they rarely discuss, insecurities they usually conceal. This isn't casual conversation. This is strategic vulnerability. They are testing emotional safety, offering small pieces of themselves to see how carefully you handle them. Every time you respond with understanding instead of judgment, their trust deepens. They may also become more protective of the connection. Instead of disappearing during stressful periods, they explain what's happening. Instead of withdrawing indefinitely after conflict, they return to repair. These are not small adjustments. For an avoidant, this represents profound emotional growth. It means the relationship has become more important than their instinct to retreat. Perhaps the clearest sign is consistency. Avoidants are often associated with unpredictability, but love motivates stability. They start showing up reliably. They follow through on promises. Their presence becomes less conditional and more secure. They choose connection even when it feels uncomfortable. It's important to understand that this transformation usually won't look dramatic. Avoidants rarely become overnight romantics. They won't suddenly turn into someone who writes poetry or delivers lengthy speeches about their feelings. Their love is quieter than that. More deliberate, more behavioral. It may look like remembering the details you mention in passing. It may sound like asking if you got home safely. It may feel like they're sitting beside you in silence, completely comfortable, making no attempt to escape. This is how avoidants say, "You matter to me." And perhaps most importantly, this is how they say, "I trust you." When an avoidant changes their behavior, they are not simply adapting. They are revealing. They are allowing their actions to speak where their words still hesitate. That is not emotional immaturity. It is emotional caution shaped by experience. So if you're waiting for an avoidant to love you loudly, you may miss the fact that they are already loving you deeply. Watch what they do. Their behavior will tell you everything their words are still learning to say. Emotional consistency is one of the clearest signs of genuine attachment, especially when you're dealing with someone who has avoidant tendencies. Avoidants are often known for unpredictability. They can be warm and engaging one moment, then distant and unavailable the next. This inconsistency isn't always manipulation. More often, it's self-protection. Intimacy activates old survival mechanisms, and retreat becomes their way of regaining control. That's why consistency matters so much. When an avoidant truly begins to care, their pattern changes. They stop treating connection like something to manage and start treating it like something to maintain. The emotional whiplash begins to fade. You no longer feel like you're constantly guessing where you stand. Their presence becomes more reliable, and reliability is the language of secure attachment. This shift doesn't happen by accident. It happens because you have moved from being an option to being emotionally significant. The avoidant mind is always assessing risk. Closeness can feel dangerous, dependency even more so. But when trust develops, the brain gradually stops labeling you as a threat. It begins to recognize you as a source of safety. That neurological shift changes behavior. They start responding in a more predictable way. Messages are returned. Plans are honored. Affection is not rationed according to their anxiety level. They remain present even when life becomes stressful. Instead of vanishing when emotions intensify, they stay connected while working through them. That is enormous. For someone who has historically relied on distance to regulate emotion, choosing consistency is an act of courage. It means they are tolerating vulnerability in order to preserve the relationship. Consistency also reveals investment. Anyone can be attentive during the exciting early stages of attraction. Novelty makes connection easy. But genuine attachment shows up after the novelty fades, when life becomes ordinary, when stress enters the picture, when there is nothing to gain except the relationship itself. An avoidant who consistently chooses you during those moments is demonstrating something far deeper than attraction. They are demonstrating commitment. You may notice subtle but powerful changes. They check in without a specific reason. They remember important dates. They follow up on conversations from days earlier. They maintain contact even when they are busy. They don't make you chase emotional breadcrumbs. These behaviors create emotional safety, and safety is the foundation of intimacy. Without consistency, love feels unstable. It becomes a game of intermittent reinforcement, one of the strongest psychological hooks in human behavior. But real attachment does not leave you constantly anxious. It calms your nervous system rather than activating it. An avoidant who loves you will increasingly become a regulating force, not a destabilizing one. This doesn't mean perfection. Avoidants are still human. They will still need space. They may still struggle under stress. But the difference is that their need for autonomy no longer overrides their responsibility to the relationship. They communicate, they return, they repair. That pattern is everything, because love is not measured by occasional intensity. It is measured by repeated reliability. Grand gestures can be manufactured. Consistency cannot. Consistency requires intention. It requires emotional discipline. It requires someone to prioritize the connection over their own temporary discomfort. And for an avoidant, that is perhaps the strongest evidence of love. When their words and actions align over time, when their presence becomes steady rather than sporadic, when you stop wondering whether they will disappear, you are witnessing genuine attachment take root. In the end, emotional consistency is more than a sign of love. It is love expressed in its most mature form, not through promises, not through dramatic declarations, but through the simple, profound act of continually showing up. When an avoidant voluntarily shares vulnerability, trust has replaced self-protection. That sentence captures one of the most profound shifts that can happen in any relationship. Avoidant individuals are not unemotional, they are highly protective of their emotional world. They learned, often very early, that relying on others could lead to disappointment, criticism, or loss of control. So they built systems, strong ones, efficient ones. Systems designed to keep them safe by keeping others at a distance. Vulnerability threatens those systems. To an avoidant, revealing fear, insecurity, sadness, or unmet needs can feel like standing unarmed in unfamiliar territory. It is not merely uncomfortable. It can feel dangerous. This is why many avoidants become experts at appearing composed. They may discuss events, ideas, or even other people's emotions with ease, while carefully avoiding their own deeper experiences. That is self-protection. It is emotional armor polished over years of use. So when an avoidant begins to voluntarily share the parts of themselves they usually conceal, something extraordinary is happening. They are not losing control. They are making a conscious decision to lower their defenses in your presence. And people do not do that without trust. This often starts subtly. A passing comment about a difficult childhood memory. An admission that they felt hurt by something. A confession about a fear they rarely acknowledge even to themselves. These disclosures may seem small, but for an avoidant, they are enormous. Each one represents a carefully measured step toward intimacy. They are essentially asking a silent question. What will you do with this part of me? Your response matters. If you judge, dismiss, or weaponize their openness, the walls will likely return stronger than before. But if you receive their vulnerability with steadiness, empathy, and discretion, you reinforce a powerful new belief. Closeness can be safe. That belief changes everything. As trust deepens, their disclosures become more layered. They may share insecurities about relationships, fears of abandonment, struggles with self-worth, or moments when they felt deeply alone. This is not casual conversation. This is emotional access that very few people ever receive. And it is a privilege. An avoidant who trusts you is allowing you into the control room of their inner world. They are showing you the machinery behind their distance, the logic behind their silence, and the wounds beneath their independence. This vulnerability is often imperfect. They may stumble over their words. They may joke to soften the intensity. They may reveal something deeply personal and then immediately change the subject. That's not insincerity. That's courage wrestling with conditioning. The goal is not flawless openness. The goal is willingness. And willingness is where intimacy begins. Voluntary vulnerability also signals a remarkable internal change. Their nervous system is starting to associate you with regulation rather than threat. Instead of retreating when emotions arise, they are moving toward connection. Instead of relying solely on themselves, they are allowing themselves to be seen. That is the foundation of secure attachment. It means they are no longer protecting themselves from you. They are trusting themselves with you. For an avoidant, that distinction is monumental. Love is not always loud. Sometimes it arrives as a quiet confession in the middle of an ordinary evening, a sentence spoken carefully, a truth revealed reluctantly, a piece of history handed over with trembling hands. When that happens, pay attention, because in that moment, an avoidant is giving you more than information. They are giving you access. They are giving you trust. And in many cases, they are giving you the deepest form of love they know how to offer. Small acts of inclusion often mean more than grand romantic gestures, especially when you're dealing with someone who has an avoidant attachment style. Grand gestures are easy to misunderstand. They can be planned, performed, even borrowed from movies. Inclusion, however, is much harder to fake. It happens in ordinary moments without fanfare, without an audience, and often without the avoidant even realizing how much they are revealing. Avoidants typically guard their independence with remarkable intensity. Their routines are carefully constructed. Their personal space is not merely a preference, it is a form of regulation. Their time, their habits, their private rituals, these are the structures that help them feel safe and in control. Inviting someone into that space is not casual. It is deeply significant. When an avoidant begins including you in the smaller corners of their life, they may start to open up and let you in. They are doing something far more meaningful than buying flowers or planning an extravagant date. They are making room for you inside the system they have spent years protecting. That might look simple from the outside. They ask if you want to run errands with them. They send you a photo while grocery shopping. They mention a future event, assuming you'll be there. They invite you into their favorite weekend routine, the one they usually keep to themselves. To most people, these actions may seem ordinary. For an avoidant, they are extraordinary. Inclusion means you are no longer being treated as an external presence. You are becoming integrated into their internal map of daily life. That transition matters because avoidants do not naturally merge their world with someone else's. They compartmentalize. It helps them maintain emotional distance and a sense of autonomy. But love disrupts compartmentalization. Gradually, almost imperceptibly, you stop feeling like a visitor and start feeling like part of the architecture. They may ask your opinion before making decisions, not because they need permission, but because your perspective now carries weight. They may reference you in conversations with friends or family. They may start using language like we instead of I. That single pronoun can reveal an entire emotional revolution. The beauty of inclusion is that it reflects genuine attachment rather than performative romance. Anyone can orchestrate a dramatic evening. It takes far more vulnerability to invite someone into your ordinary Tuesday. Ordinary life is where intimacy actually lives. It's in shared grocery lists, inside jokes, spontaneous phone calls, and the comfortable assumption that you'll be part of tomorrow. Avoidants, perhaps more than anyone, understand the significance of this. Their private world has always been their refuge. Allowing someone access means accepting the possibility of dependence, influence, and emotional impact. That can feel terrifying, which is exactly why it means so much. An avoidant who includes you is not surrendering their independence. They are redefining it. They are discovering that closeness does not have to mean losing themselves. It can mean expanding themselves. And that's one of the healthiest transitions an avoidant can make. This is why you should pay close attention to the subtle invitations. the casual "come with me," the unprompted update during their day. The way they naturally assume your presence in future plans. These moments are easy to overlook because they lack cinematic drama. But relationships are not built on cinematic drama. They are built on repeated inclusion, on the decision made over and over again to weave another person into the fabric of your life. For an avoidant, that weaving is an act of enormous trust. It says, "I like my world the way it is, and I want you in it." That may not sound poetic, but it is one of the most intimate declarations they can make, because grand gestures impress. Inclusion bonds, and for an avoidant, bonding is everything. An avoidant who loves you begins choosing connection over control. That is one of the clearest and most transformative signs of genuine attachment. At the core of avoidant behavior is not a lack of emotion, but a deep need for self-protection. Control becomes their strategy. It allows them to manage uncertainty, regulate vulnerability, and minimize the risk of disappointment. If they stay emotionally independent, they cannot be hurt in the same way they may have been before. Control feels safe. Connection does not, at least not at first. This is why avoidants often keep one foot near the exit. They may care deeply, yet still maintain invisible boundaries designed to preserve autonomy. They decide when to engage, how much to reveal, and when to retreat. This isn't necessarily manipulation. More often it is regulation. They are trying to remain emotionally intact. But love changes the equation. When an avoidant truly falls for someone, they begin to realize that maintaining total control comes at a cost. The very strategies that once protected them now threaten the relationship they value. Distance no longer feels empowering. It starts feeling lonely. And that is the turning point. They begin making choices that prioritize the bond over their instinct to self-isolate. Instead of withdrawing at the first sign of emotional intensity, they stay present. Instead of shutting down during difficult conversations, they engage. Instead of protecting their independence at all costs, they start protecting the relationship. This is not a small adjustment. It is a complete reorientation of their internal operating system. You may notice they become more collaborative. Decisions that were once made unilaterally now become shared discussions. They ask for your input. They consider how their choices affect you. The person who once fiercely guarded every inch of personal territory begins voluntarily creating shared space. That is connection replacing control. Conflict reveals this shift even more clearly. An avoidant operating from fear will often retreat, deflect, or emotionally disengage. An avoidant operating from love will lean in, even when every instinct tells them to run. They may still feel the urge to withdraw. That urge does not disappear overnight, but they choose differently. Choice is everything. Love is not the absence of fear. It is the willingness to act despite it. This is particularly meaningful for avoidants because their old patterns are deeply ingrained. They are not simply changing habits, they are overriding survival mechanisms. Every time they stay in a difficult conversation, they try to stay calm and composed. Every time they communicate instead of disappearing, every time they admit they need you, they are rewriting emotional history, and that takes courage. Choosing connection also means tolerating uncertainty. Relationships are inherently unpredictable. They require trust, flexibility, and the acceptance that another person can affect your emotional state. For someone who has spent years minimizing dependence, this can feel profoundly destabilizing. Yet love makes the risk worthwhile. They begin to understand that intimacy is not the loss of freedom. It is the expansion of it. True connection does not trap them, it strengthens them. An avoidant who loves you will not suddenly become someone else. They will still need space. They will still value autonomy. But the difference is that autonomy no longer serves as a barrier. It becomes a foundation from which they can connect more fully. They stop asking, "How do I protect myself from this relationship?" and start asking, "How do I help this relationship thrive?" That question changes everything. Because when an avoidant consistently chooses closeness over distance, honesty over concealment, and partnership over solitary control, they are offering something incredibly rare. They are not merely loving you. They are trusting love itself. Real love for an avoidant looks like sustained effort, not temporary intensity. This distinction matters because avoidants are often misunderstood, both by others and sometimes by themselves. They can be intensely present in the beginning of a relationship. Novelty feels exciting. Distance still exists. Vulnerability is limited. At that stage, connection can feel safe because the stakes remain low, but intensity is easy. Sustainability is hard. Anyone can be captivating for a weekend. Anyone can send a flurry of messages, make grand promises, or create the intoxicating rush of emotional chemistry. That kind of intensity can be real, but it is not the same as love. Love reveals itself over time, under pressure, and through repetition. For an avoidant, this is especially true. Avoidants often experience a sharp shift once the relationship becomes emotionally significant. The closer they feel, the more their protective instincts activate. Suddenly, what once felt exciting can begin to feel threatening. Dependence looms. Expectations emerge. Vulnerability becomes unavoidable. This is where temporary intensity often collapses, but genuine love does something different. It stays. An avoidant who truly loves you will continue choosing the relationship even after the honeymoon phase fades. They will remain engaged when novelty no longer carries the connection. They will keep investing when emotions become complicated, when misunderstandings arise, and when the relationship requires work rather than just excitement. That continued investment is the real marker. Sustained effort shows up in ordinary ways. It is the consistent text, not the dramatic late-night confession. It is remembering your important meeting, not posting a romantic quote. It is showing up when you're stressed, not only when things are fun and effortless. Effort is love translated into behavior. And for avoidance, behavior always matters more than words. You may notice they become more intentional over time. They communicate more clearly. They work to understand your needs. They make adjustments even when those adjustments challenge their natural tendencies. They do not simply enjoy the relationship when it is convenient, they contribute to it when it is difficult. That is love maturing. Temporary intensity seeks emotional highs. Sustained effort builds emotional safety. One is fueled by excitement. The other is fueled by commitment. Avoidants, perhaps more than anyone, reveal their feelings through consistency. Their willingness to remain emotionally available over weeks, months, and years tells you far more than any passionate declaration ever could, because staying is not always easy for them. It requires tolerating vulnerability, uncertainty, and the possibility of disappointment. It means resisting the familiar urge to retreat when intimacy deepens. It means choosing discomfort in the short term to preserve connection in the long term. That is an extraordinary act. Real love also becomes visible during conflict. Temporary intensity often disappears when challenges arise. Sustained effort leans into repair. An avoidant who loves you will return after disagreements. They will seek understanding rather than escape. They will value resolution over emotional distance. Not perfectly, but persistently. And persistence is the heartbeat of secure love. This is what makes an avoidance commitment so meaningful. They are not merely following emotion in the moment. They are making a repeated decision. Again and again, they choose the relationship over old defenses. That choice accumulates. Over time, it becomes trust, then security, then something deeply resilient. So do not measure an avoidance love solely by moments of intensity. Measure it by the patterns they create. Measure it by their reliability, their growth, and their willingness to keep showing up after the excitement settles. Anyone can burn brightly for a moment. Love is proven by who continues tending the fire. And when an avoidant does that, when they remain, invest, adapt, and endure, you are witnessing one of the most authentic forms of love there is.